This is Earth Soul Medicine, a space for spirituality, connection, and next level nourishment. Basically, all that woo-woo stuff that can be hard to discuss with the general public, that's what we are here for. You have found your tribe. So get comfy, get grounded, and let's see what comes up in this space today. This is part 2 of Sam and Chelsea's first episode of Earth Soul Medicine. If you missed last week's part 1, be sure to check it out on Spotify or Apple Music, or on the Earth Soul Medicine YouTube channel. Enjoy part 2.
Yeah, when you are talking about, I think, turning on the consciousness, I've been taking a dialectical behavioral therapy, and we've talked about this class, and they refer to that as wise mind. And for a long time, I was like, what are you talking about, wise mind? Because I forget the woman's name who wrote the textbook, Margaret, I think. But in her description of how the mind works, it's emotional, rational, and in the middle is the wise mind. And so they encourage you throughout times of your day, or to do it for a month straight, morning and evening, to try to identify what brain state basically you're in and how you can get to a wise mind. And that took me forever to figure that out. I was like, how do I know if I'm in wise mind? I don't know what that means. And then I was explaining it to somebody, and they were like, it's that. It's that moment that you realize you're doing something and you need to change that behavior. That's when your wise mind kicks in. And I was like, oh, yes, I'm aware. I've become aware. It's funny how people are calling the same thing something different. I find that confusing.
Yes. And I think it can be sometimes helpful how you get to see it from different angles, you know?
Yeah. Like maybe there's similarities, but it's not exactly the same.
There's this podcast I really love I told you about called Awakening OD, which is the Awakening Orientation Department, and she talks about this idea that there's imagine a mirror disco ball. And that's all of our consciousness. But you are only one little facet of the mirror. It's a million little mirrors that make up the disco ball. And you're one little one little mirror section, facing one way on the ball. And that's reflecting your version of truth. And all the other consciousnesses of the earth it's all the same truth we're coming from, but we're looking at it from 1,000 different little mirror angles, reflecting our own version of it. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
She describes it much better. You should check that one out if this is grabbing you. but I kind of got lost in trying to recreate the metaphor. I can't totally say where I was going with it, but it's it is confusing how there's so many ways to look at it. And also maybe it's giving you different little perspectives on the one version of truth. And this is kind of, I feel what I was trying to speak to in my childhood spiritual, I got to see many different perspectives, right? Yeah. And it's also how, just to try to thread this whole little sewing project together, of it's how I handle it when I'm in that situation you were describing with being around other, parents who don't parent their kids in the same way, or, I, as a preschool director, over the years have seen hundreds of ways of raising kids, not all of which agree with the textbooks I've read. Yeah. And I have to really grapple with the judgment piece. And this isn't just apply to how people raise their kids. If you open a newspaper, it's pretty easy to find people living their lives in ways you could judge, Yes. But I try to bring it back to that image of, I'm just seeing my little reflection of the mirror ball. That's my version of the truth. Yeah. That's how it makes sense to me. Everyone's got some little grain of the truth, I think. I don't know. Sometimes people act in pretty unlovable ways that are hard to understand how they could have gotten to that version of it being the truth. Yes. But maybe they're just on the full opposite side of the disco ball from me, I guess. I don't know how else to explain it to myself, but it helps me.
Though. Yes, because I'm always the one, and maybe this, obviously this is from my own perspective because I've been doing a lot of like inner, core wound work and whatnot. So like anytime I'm like, or Malcolm and I keep saying his actual name, my husband and I see someone out in the world and we, really disagree or jump to that judgment. Like, wow, that's really effed up. Like, why is that happening? And my immediate thing is like, oh, they must be wounded. Mm-hmm. It's their trauma.
Totally. That's where my mind goes to.
Yes. And I think Malcolm's always like, okay.
Yeah, that's how most people receive me also in that moment. You're such a softie, Chelsea. You just take whatever they give you.
I find people make that face at me too whenever I like attribute whatever their experience is to the astrology of the time. Because they'll be like, oh wow, this coffee's been causing me some issues. I feel jittery. I was like, well, it's Gemini season.
Yeah, well, the moon's in Virgo, so
yeah.
I mean, yeah,
this makes sense to me. Yeah, and then they're like, right, okay, yeah, that's what's happening.
Sure.
And then they scoot.
Oh, it's probably because
because
Mercury's in retrograde too, right,
yes!
Chelsea? Yeah. Everyone's favorite scapegoat. Well, yeah, and also, it's true.
Yes, I do feel like that's like a, what do you call that? Like a buzzword, a buzz phrase, I guess. It's Mercury in retrograde.
Totally. Well, that one has kind of gotten a bad rap, but.
Oh, yes.
There are literally 3 questions prepped in my journal that could come out of where we're at right now that I want to ask you. I don't even know which way to go. But.
Well, let's dig into it. Let's check them out.
So one of them is that I was, speaking of astrology,
yes.
I am obsessed with your planner. It's so good.
Yay.
And
I'm so happy.
I'm curious how you... Okay, so the way I end up using astrology is I can like maybe see it that day. Like I'll wake up and I'll read this little thing that reminds me that the moon is in whatever it's in today, and as I'm going through the day I might have that experience like, God, I really feel like yada yada. Oh, that's so Leo. Like that makes total sense,
Yes.
Like I see it in the moment, or where I see it the best is in retrospect, like
yes.
This happened to me this morning as I was looking at your planner, and you had a description of how this month's full moon in Sagittarius was going to be kind of a doozy. You wrote mental health alert month, moon month.
Right.
And I couldn't have even articulated that a few days ago when it was the full moon, but now looking back at last week, I'm like, whoo, that was a mental health alert moon right there. Like, it was heavy. I know there was a lot of Chiron happening in the sky, pulling out all these old wounds.
Yes.
Really feeling the wounding thing in this past week a lot. But I can only see it in the present moment or in retrospect. And I'm like boggled by how someone could have written this planner in what you probably did this last fall, but you already knew that it was going to be a mental health alert month now that it's May,
to be clear, Jocelyn Rousseau wrote those astrology articles. So she was a contributor for the astrology, which I have now doing myself for 2025. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's taking a lot of like, now that I'm doing it myself, what's beautiful about technology these days is they'll map it out because where they're going to be is a mathematic equation.
Totally.
So they'll map it out and they'll give you like the raw data of the moon's going to be here, the planets are going to be here, and then you can... This is not planner related because I'm not doing this for the planner because it's a crazy amount of work. But what I've found to be like... What has taught me the most about astrology and seeing it reflected, basically disseminated from the light, is mapping out the month. So, like, what personal planet, the planets closest to the sun, are the personal ones that affect you on a personal level. And the planets, the outer planets, are the ones that carry more influence for the collective. So you're going to see like their energies played out more in the collective. And then like figuring out where those planets are going to be in relation to each other on a specific date and what the angles they make mean and could mean for you has been like a freaking education, like on a level, because there's so much to astrology.
Right.
There's so much to it, and there's so many different ways to look at it and decipher it. And Jocelyn came from a medical astrological standpoint, which I find so valuable, because I'm like, I love to know that Gemini is going to affect my nervous system, because then maybe I can cope ahead with that knowledge and prepare, you know, a nerve tonic for myself, or I'm going to stop drinking coffee when Sun enters Gemini because I know I'm already going to be so buzzed. So that's what I love about the medical astrology. And I've been taking a course, and I really hope I get her name right. I think it's Judith Hill. And she has written many books on medical astrology, but she didn't write the book on it, you know. She's compiling ancient knowledge. And that's been incredibly helpful. But also there's like Vedic astrology and lots of different lineages. And I think like modern astrology is like a hodgepodge of that. But also modern astrology is very superficial, like most things, right? Like
Totally.
you're reading your zodiac, your zodiac horoscope in the New York Times, and it's like just your sun sign,
Right.
And you're like, what am I supposed to do with
most
that?
People that I talk to don't know what else they don't know what the big three is. They don't know anything about their astrology other than their sun sign.
Yes. And so I think that's
Such
why
a thin
people
slice.
it's scratching the surface, and I think that's why people are like, it's dumb, like, you know, because they can't relate. Whereas if you sit down with your natal chart and you're like, wow, like here's where I had my Saturn return and I had a friggin' midlife crisis, you know, like that's going to be impactful
It'd
for
be
you.
like, describe Sam. Well, she wears earrings.
Yes, exactly.
Like that. Yeah. And what else? Right. That's like one little tiny piece of the puzzle. If you don't get the whole description, you can't appreciate the beauty of the whole picture.
Yes.
You know?
It's so true. Yeah. But for this upcoming planner, yes, I've been looking at where the moon's going to be, what it's going to be doing, and then like applying the knowledge I've been learning in the study of astrology in general. And it's crazy because I'm noticing we're changing the layout of the planner a little bit, and if you don't know anything about Portal Planner, check it out. But we're changing the layout, so I'm having a theme article where I'm talking about like the theme of the month and how the astrology plays in. And it's mind-blowing because the new moon is always in the same sign of the sun of the month. And I wish I had my papers with me so I could give you an actual example. But I was writing for May, and it was Beltane, which was like a festival for fertility. Right. You know, it's like the peak of fertility. And it's the month of where Aries meets Taurus. So it's like the first sign of the zodiac, that initiatory, that motivation, that immediate action, that fire becomes Taurus, the stable, you know, the pleasurable, the fertile, the sensual, which is like, it's a handoff. And you're like, I see this in Beltane.
My mom used to say, I can't say this because it has a cuss word in it, but I'm saying it anyway.
Go ahead.
Beltane, the saying is, hooray, hooray, the 1st of May, outdoor fun starts today.
Yes. It really is like the whole point of the thing. It's like a festival of frivolity. Yeah. Where you just like go naked into the street and you throw flowers at everybody and you make babies. That was the thing. That's what, you know, in nature, that's when the babies are being born.
Right.
Which is like, I guess, the manifestation of fertility itself. So it's like that, the honoring of that and the hope that is what's coming for you so you don't starve to death in wintertime. But it's been amazing to me to see the astrology align with these like pagan wheel of the year, or even like, you know, just ancient rituals and festivals and stuff. And how like it may have been a time that astrology was socially accepted and it was a big part of society, because there have been times where that has existed, or it was a time that astrology was like persecuted, like and pushed under the rug, and you're not allowed to know these things. But in both times on Earth, you still see that innate connection, because it's almost like a type of unconscious knowing.
Totally.
It's like I'm being influenced by the light of the stars, even though I'm unconscious of it.
Right.
Which is it's so fascinating to me. And I remember, like, when I first started on my mentoring journey with David, it was very much just plants and like just shamanic journeying and learning the principles of this kind of work. And then he had a big shift to astrology. And I had other like spiritual friends and spiritual teachers who were also having a big shift to astrology, and it was like a collective happening, right? Like all across the globe, people were like having an awakening to this old information. And like
this was like 2 years ago.
Yeah,
I was on board.
Yes,
yeah.
It was, everybody was like, "Wow, this is gonna be a thing. This is a coming to this knowledge again in the future, and how important it's gonna be." And at first I was real resistant to that, of course, like the stubborn bull in me, because I'm double Taurus. I got sun and ascendant. It's like a thing. But yeah, since then I've crossed over. I've come to the astrology side. It's been fascinating.
It really explains so much in my life.
Yes.
Like it just blows me away over and over and over again.
Yeah, and the more you get into it, like the deeper you get, or the more planets you know. And I follow this woman, Kelly Hunter, who I've spoke to a couple times, and she does like the asteroids. So she's doing like the Kuiper belt, which they've found to be like right outside of the Milky Way, and it's like it has a direct impact to us, and like the way that our universe had expanded, whatever the science of it.
Right.
And so they keep identifying these Kuiper belt objects. They're calling them objects, but they're basically, it's basically like a meteor. It's like a hunk of rock. And so every time they identify a new one, the practice in astrology, right? Astronomy. The practice of astronomy is when you find a celestial body, you name it after like a god or a goddess of ancient times. So they keep naming these objects after god and goddesses, and then that energy, that attributed energy, is then like embodied into this whole astrology, and you start seeing how it's a perfect fit. That's crazy,
wild.
man.
How can that even work out?
I know.
That's
why
cool
I think
intersection
it's
of science and magic.
Yes, isn't it? Gosh, I took, and like no hate on the library, because I love the library and I think it's really important for our community. But they had this class, and it was astronomy and astrology. And it was just like a public offering, like an astronomer is coming to talk to you about it. And so I was like, oh yes, this is so up my alley. And so I went. I learned some scientific things, but the one slide for astrology in the PowerPoint was basically like,
It got one slide.
yes, this is BS. He was like, this isn't real. You think, and I'm like, why would you name it
Really
astronomy
bad branding.
and astrology just to like astrology in front of, and as soon as that happened, I was like, man, this is like, I was so like down, I was disheartened, and so I left. I felt kind of bad for like leaving halfway through, and I was like, nah, and I gave him a bad review. But at the bottom I was like, I still love the library, still do these things. But yeah, it's funny how, I mean, same thing with like medical science, right? Like Western science, and like the absence of herbalism from that, and like the like the judgment you get when you choose plants over chemical derivatives of plants is insane to me.
It is ridiculous.
But like, you know, my husband one time went to the doctor and was like, hey, I have like a fungus or a bacteria on my skin, and I'm just gonna like drink some cranberry juice and put some salve on it. And the doctor was like, laughed in his face and was like, that's not gonna work. Take this liver killing prescription drug.
Will have an impact on the next 7 generations.
So yes, exactly. So we treated it at home and it's gone. You know, but it's that same principle of, well, science knows best, even though science is constantly changing based on more information, just like we as humans are constantly changing from information, which it basically just light, right? Information.
Whoa. Stop. Oh my God. Never thought of that like that.
Yes.
That's rad.
Yeah. Crazy stuff. Humans are cool. We're very cool.
And totally nuts.
And totally nuts.
And that's what makes it fascinating.
Really, though, it's a wild ride. I put menstruation on my list.
It's one of my
topics.
favorite things to talk about.
'Cause I would
Fertility and
talk about
menstruation,
it.
I could talk about for a week straight. No problem.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. Oh,
It's
yeah. Let's
fine.
talk all about that.
Okay, well, let's do it. I'm like, I'm here for it. I have fertility on the brain too, because I really want to have a second kid. And with my first kid, I was I was tracking my cycle.
Sign of
I
verb.
don't
Adjective.
want to take birth control myself. Like I
No,
certainly
definitely don't take birth control.
will
That
never
shit's
take
so bad
the
for
pill.
you.
It's so bad for you.
It's
And
so bad
I
for you.
hate having this conversation, especially with women, because so many women take birth control and like swear by it.
Okay, if
Then-
anybody's listening and that's how they feel, just at least do me this favor and go read the book or listen to it on Audible, The Fifth Vital Sign,
Oh.
and then reevaluate. And if you still think that, kudos to you. But if you don't, you're welcome. That is an amazing resource.
I have
that
not
will-
read this.
If you think birth control is a good idea, I would be amazed if that book didn't change your mind. It's very research based and also very listenable, like so fascinating, and will blow your mind about everything you thought was cool about birth control and how it's actually going to be the
Kills
ruin
you.
of our society.
I can't wait to listen to that. I
So
have 4
good.
credits I need to use.
Oh,
Wonderful.
that's definitely one.
Yeah,
it's read
because-
by the author, Lisa Hendrickson
Oh,
Jack.
great.
And she's brilliant. And she has a podcast of her own called Fertility Friday, and it's really good.
Oh, look at all these little nuggets. This is exciting. My period's very important to me, and it feels like a very human female thing to experience. It's like really a part of my identity, and I couldn't imagine not having it. So I was like, I don't want to get on birth control. And he was like, condoms are weird and I'm not going to use them. And I was like, well, you're going to be pulling out for the rest of our marriage, like until we're having babies. And he was like, it'd be cool if we didn't do that. And I was like, okay, well, let me try to track my cycle. And that's, at the time, it was like 2019. It was 2018. And I was tracking my cycle,
God damn,
and
what
I
a time in the
knew.
world to conceive a kid.
What a time.
That's a whole other conversation, but
Yeah.
fudge. Wow. Go on,
You
sorry.
ain't got to tell me, okay?
Yeah, I can't.
I was right there.
imagine.
Yeah, it was it was terrible. But
Must have been.
also kind of, I don't know. I was kind of a different person because that was a long time ago now. And I hadn't dealt with any of my stuff. So I had a bout of postpartum depression that I couldn't identify at the time, like in the depths. But now I look back and I was like, wow, that's pretty textbook. So I didn't want to leave the house. And then with all of like the culture of fear rhetoric coming out through the television and everywhere,
Yeah.
and people around you and your family, and I was like, well, I'm never going to leave my house. I'm going to be a
Totally.
hermit.
Right.
I was like Lysol, and I'm not proud to admit this, but I was Lysoling, and I hadn't bought a can of Lysol in like 20 years.
Right.
But I bought
We all
like
went a little crazy for a minute
a
there.
6-pack,
Yeah.
and I'm spraying packages before they arrive. You know?
There was a time I wiped down all
was
my
crazy.
groceries. And then was like,
Yes.
wait a minute, what are we doing here?
That's exactly what I did. It's like I took a step back and was like, what happened? But
I
anyway,
took us down the
birth
pandemic
control.
track. Hold on, you.
Yes,
Where were
yeah,
we?
wait a second. Birth control. I was tracking my cycle.
Yeah.
And so I knew the day, it was ovulation day. And Malcolm had been wanting a baby for a long time. And I was like, you're crazy. We had traveled to the South to visit graduate schools because I was like, I'm getting my PhD. Like, I don't know about you. I'm tired of growing pot out in Cave Junction. I have a bigger purpose. Like, I need to find my purpose. It was a whole quest for me. And I was like, okay, getting my PhD has got to be part of my purpose. Apparently not. It was getting pregnant was a part of the path.
Apparently not.
That's hilarious. I didn't mean to be punny. But yeah, so then I was like, okay, cool. I like conceded to his request basically. And the great thing about having your first kid is that you don't know. Like,
right.
You don't know the what you signed up for and the real sacrifice of parenting. So I was like, yeah, sure, that sounds good. And then afterwards I was like, no way, I want to go to school. That's why I came here in the first place. So I door dashed Plan B or whatever it was in Atlanta that I used.
DoorDash.
Like I could, like you're like pick this up for me at the store
or whatever.
Yes. Yeah. The poor dude who dropped it off. I was like, oh, I'm so
Way
sorry.
Worse than sending your boyfriend to buy you tampons. Next level.
Yeah, it was bad. It was bad. Luckily, he was real nice about it though. I was like,
The
here you
cashier was
go.
looking at that guy. I was like, what?
Yes. And even now, like knowing the chemically laden nastiness of Plan B, it is what it is. But I was like, no way I'm having this baby. I'm going to go back to school. And then, the next month I was like, wow, I'm pregnant. I was sitting on the couch and he was playing video games back when he had the time to play video games. And I was so nauseous. I was like, what's going on? I'm pregnant. I knew it. And then luckily we had a test on hand. Good times back then.
Thank God that
like a
all
whole
went
nother
down
life.
because you have a whole little magical life.
Yes. Seriously
now.
though, like that is what made me like everything happens for a reason.
Amen.
There's a reason I moved to Oregon because when I moved here I had culture shock and I was like pretty depressed. I was like, this is not anything what I thought it would be. What did I do? But now I'm like, I could never leave. I could never leave.
I feel like everything you say leads to like 20 possible paths of conversations I
know.
want to have with you, but I'm just going to keep taking it down different tangent roads. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is about like, if you believe, I'm guessing you do, I don't know, if you believe that you've been on this earth before, if this is like your first trip here, or if, and the reason this just popped into my head is because I've had this with many kids, but your kid is one of the major examples who you're like, this kid is not their first time on earth. Like,
Oh, yeah.
she is such an old soul. You can like see other lives when you look into her eyes.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that she's lived, that she's still it's like she's still living them a little. I don't even know how to describe it. It's mind-boggling, but she's like a really strong example of it.
Yeah, and it's hard for me to like figure that out.
Yeah, I bet.
Because number one, yes, to answer your question, 100%. And I have done a lot of like past life regressions where you gain information from those past lives. Very healing. If you haven't done that, wow.
Not formally, just like if I was tripping
Yeah.
balls, maybe I had a moment.
That's when they often come up, Chelsea.
That's the best kind.
Oh, that's awesome.
What a good preschool teacher.
This is how they all should be. I feel like you understand my kid more. Because I see that in her too. And I've gotten a lot of information, like downloads or whatever you want to call it, that this isn't our first interaction
That
this
is also
closely.
part of my question.
Yes.
As you keep coming back, do you have the same, are there people you're traveling with from lifetime to lifetime? Because I definitely have that.
Yes, I feel that for sure. And I've also heard multiple spiritual teachers describe it as every person that you meet in this incarnation, this embodiment of your soul, you have previously been connected to. And every interaction is an opportunity to either like clear karma or forge a new path. And I've found that to sometimes be overwhelming because I'm like, really, every single person, like, holy crap.
That's a lot of people to work through.
Yes. And I have come to the conclusion that, like, it doesn't always take immense work. Like, the interaction you have at the grocery store where somebody looks at you sideways, like, maybe that's more of just like a mirror moment, you know, and it's all just like a bigger reflection of you and what you need to deal with. But I think with your nuclear relationships, it really plays out. Like, I know, and it's hard to say this to people who also don't believe in reincarnation or past lives or any sort of like cosmic timeline.
Right.
Because if you don't have the foundation, what I'm going to say to you is going to sound crazy. And I've experienced this with my husband too, because like I've said before, when we got together, I was not into this and I did not believe this. And, you know, I've been like, this isn't the first time for us. This is not, and I'm getting that clearly, and I'm seeing times before where we were together, and I was like, this. And what's crazy is when I met him, the moment I met him and actually was like in his orbit, like close enough to feel the field of his heart. But when I got, you know, really close to him to like feel him, I was like, it was like this.
Yeah, I had that with my partner also.
Yes, it was an immediate magnetism. And I'm like, this is it. I found my husband. It was like the second day we hung out. And I was like, this is the one.
And then the other track in your brain's like, what?
That's crazy.
That's insanity.
Yes.
This is not Frozen. We're not playing that game, you know? Even though we hadn't seen Frozen yet. But it is, yeah.
It is. Yeah, and I remember.
The past life just knows.
The past life, your oversoul knows.
Oversoul.
Yeah, so you have like your higher
it's like
self.
Your wise mind.
Kind of, yes. It's like your cosmic wise mind.
Ooh.
So it's like your piece of the mosaic is the oversoul.
Wow.
And then on Earth you have your higher spirit, what do they call that? Higher self.
Knew how to articulate that. Yes. That's
yes.
the thing.
Isn't it? When I first heard that, it blew my mind too. And gosh, I wish I remember the guy I heard that from, and I had a session with him, and he was explaining it to me, and I was like, wow, you really know what's up. As soon as he said it, I could see it.
That's
what
knowing.
happens.
Yeah.
Yes. Crap, what was I going to say?
You had it with Malcolm when you first met him. Your oversoul.
Yes, and our picnic date. We had a picnic date at night on the third day of knowing each other.
Aww.
It was real cute. But on the energetic level, at the end of the night, we were like gonna kiss, you know? And I remember putting my hands on him, like his chest or something. And I was physically vibrating. And he thought I was like dying. He was like, what is that? Like, is your phone ringing? Do you have your phone on you? And I was like, no, I think I'm vibrating. And he was like, are you having a stroke?
How one vibrates?
Yeah. Yeah, it was crazy. But after that, I was like, yep, my body knows. My soul knows. And this is it. Giving birth was the catalyst for my spiritual awakening. Mm-hmm. And I would never have been the same without her. And she's a friggin' Scorpio. Like, there's some intense, like, she came for a very specific purpose of transformation specifically. And what's crazy is, I'm going to nerd out about astrology, but looking at her natal charts, her north node and south node are the complete opposite of mine.
What?
Like, she's Capricorn, North node, Cancer, South node, and I'm the same signs but opposite of that.
Dude.
And I was like, holy crap. I was like, wherever
like
you
an
just
astrological
came,
slap
I'm going. Yeah,
face.
Wherever you are going, I just came from. Yeah, dude, that blew my
That's
mind.
Crazy.
I was like, I'm here to parent you specifically. And then someone had said to me, like, when you're like a soul looking to embody in a fetus or whatever, a woman who's conceived, you are very intentional about who you choose Like, you choose the family you enter into. And I was like, I just want to make you proud. Like, you chose me. I got to be the best for you.
Right.
But yeah, that's crazy. Great question.
Good answer.
It's nice to see you see that too, you know?
When you see a lot of kids, I mean, I think you get a really different view as a parent who knows one kid really, really, really well. I've never known a kid as well as you could know your kid.
Right.
But I have known hundreds of kids at a specific place in their development. And so the way you know, if you worked with 100 plants 1,000 times, you know, you like learn their qualities in a different way.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you can really see it in a kid's eyes and mannerisms, like from when you first meet them, that it's one of their first times around or it's not. And the ones who it's not are so fascinating to me. I mean, I love them. No, I don't mean like that's a better kid if they've had past lives. You know, no such thing as that. But like, it's just wild. And I've recently read a few articles of there being a growing awareness of people who are doing like research on kids who remember their last life and talk about it really cognizantly and like to the point that their parents maybe research it and try and figure out who the actual person was that they were.
Wow.
Which is like, I mean, how could you really prove it out? But when there's the knowing, right? There's like things that resonate, and you can read an article that'll pretty much convince you if you're in that mind space to be gullible to things like I always am. That I'm pretty open-minded to it. I'm like, sure, I believe that because
I'm here for it.
Because I believe what children say, and I mean, there's things like, how would they make that up? You know?
Yes.
And there's one family I knew. A daughter said something to her mom like, "Do you remember the time when I was the mom and you were the baby?"
Oh my God.
And like, yeah, if you knew that mom and kid, you'd be like, yeah, I could see that time for you guys and how it's still playing out in your lessons of life, you know?
Yes. It's like the whole point of the parent-child relationship is like to getting to that knowledge that what was unresolved, you know, like what am I... And it's a lifelong situation. And I oftentimes feel like I need to speed that up. You know, I'm like, what's here that I'm not seeing? And I have to just let it unfold because it is the unfolding, you know, like the lotus or the rose. It's the unfolding that's the journey, not the destination. And I think with kids, that's so important too.
It's all so much about that journey, or like, in early childhood, we say a lot, like, mostly about art, but it's true about everything. It's about the process. It's not the product, right?
Yeah.
It's not like how the finger painting turns out when it's all done so that you want to hang it on the wall and it's pretty. It's about playing with the finger paint, you know? It's about getting your hands super messy and it gets on your elbows and it bumps onto your friend and it's funny. And then all of a sudden we all have paint on us and like that is the juicy stuff of life.
Yes. And it's the people around you too. Like it's not just mother-daughter. It's you know, the husband's there too. Like what's there to be resolved? How were we all together once? And what I find interesting with being a mom now is I've experienced this with pets. Cats specifically. I think cats come and they were more than your animal companion.
Well, if you're a hedge witch, for sure.
Yeah.
You've got some familiars going on, right?
Yes! Oh my gosh. It's so
I can
funny.
totally picture you in another life. with
like
your
1,000 cats.
Your cauldron.
Yes.
Some people would
too,
hear that with a
actually.
lot of negative biases. And if
yeah.
it's not clear from my tone, I mean that like the greatest compliment that could exist.
Like a dream come true,
Yeah.
really. Yes. The cat thing, though, like for real, I remember I had and it's funny you mentioned this about children this age because, you know, they do say, and I think we all witness children at that age having way more of a intuitiveness or a psychic awareness of
They haven't been
the
brainwashed
unseen.
that shit's not real.
Yes, they're way more in touch, and their chakra system's still developing. They're still in like first to second chakra. I think it's like you get to 7 and you start developing your upper chakras. 7. Stop.
Go on, sorry.
So I feel like instead of just having that one rod of connection, that one channel that starts at the soul star chakra, you're just like bathed in light constantly. You're just like soaking up, you're like an orb, not a channel.
And you are literally in formation.
Yes.
Like,
yes. And you're forming up and yeah, man, kids.
whoa.
When I was a kid, I was talking about that psychic awareness of children just at that age. And when I was that age, we had a pet, and I named the cat Pearl. I didn't know it had any significance, and I suspect, and I don't remember, and my parents may say differently, but I suspect they let her loose. Like she was a house cat, and she got out, or she was let out, and she disappeared, and presumably she died, and I never saw her again. Fast forward 25 years, and I sought out a psychic medium, and I was like, I'd like to, I feel this within myself. I'd like to find a mentor to help me progress this. And so she took me through a reading to see what that would be like. And we talked to my great-great-grandmother who had passed, and we had a conversation with her. And then at the end, she was like, Pearl is with me.
Aww.
And I was like, pearls? Because the medium was like, pearls. Are there pearls of any significance? And I was like, well, I don't know about that. And then we hung up, and then afterwards, I was like, Pearl the cat. Then I sat down and meditated and had a whole expansive thing that it is not just the cat. This was like a child I had in a past life that I had lost. And then the losing of the cat, me as a child, was like a recreation of that, like, splice of a timeline. And I was like, it blew my mind.
No
it
kidding.
Totally blew my mind. Cats, man.
So do you have, how many cats
I got
do you
a
have?
cat. Well, I just got... Funny you ask.
If you like cats, it's not just one. I know.
I was working at Wildlife Images, and I walk in, they have the catio where they bring in rescues. I swear to God, okay, there was somebody in there, like a teenager, cuddling this cat, like gonna take this cat home. It turns around to look at me, makes some serious eye contact, had the brightest green eyes I had ever seen, and was like, meow.
Samantha.
And I was like, that's my cat. I literally like stood still and was like, that's my cat. And I went in and I was like, are you trying to get this cat?
What,
To this
you think you're
poor
taking
little
this
girl?
cat? You think this is your cat?
Because you're wrong. You are wrong. And she was like, well, I already have 5 cats. And I was like, nope, this cat is a 1 cat home. And she was like, I don't think my mom's going to let me get another one. And secretly I was like, yes, on the inside.
My mom said it's fine.
So then I marched straight into the front desk and I laid down $60 and I was like, that's my cat. Don't let her take my cat. And then I took him home and it's been a magical experience.
Yeah.
He's the freaking best. And he has like his presence. He has a huge presence.
You've been tuning up his field, huh?
I've been tuning up his field. I actually looked up like the chakra system of cats. Okay. It's not too different from ours. But
Wow.
yeah.
How is it different from ours?
It's like parallel to the ground.
I should have seen that coming.
Because it follows like the spinal cord, like
Right.
ours follows our spinal column.
Trippy.
So theirs follows theirs. Same amount of chakras though. But yeah, oftentimes he doesn't need my help. He's very adept. I mean, like all cats.
Seems like an animal thing. That's what's wrong with the humans.
Well, you'd be surprised because working at a wildlife rehabilitation center, I've seen some really depressing things. Like, you know, and you get the rhetoric that like we're helping these animals. If we release them to the wild, they would die. And I'm like, what the f is wrong with dying?
Right.
Why can't you let a natural process take over? Like, the ego of humans is insane to me.
That is the real problem in that situation.
Yes. And I'm like, you're injecting them with all sorts of like veterinarian pharmaceuticals. Like it's so unnatural.
That's a better life.
Caged. Yeah. It's like, let's prop you up so that people can look at you under a guise of education.
It's an interesting train of thought I never really went down before about how our whole culture is so afraid of death, and whether it's for animals or humans. We have worked awfully hard in this last century to learn how to not die, or maybe not this just century, you know, like we want to have as long a life as we can. And then like you're holding yourself back from getting on to your next life.
Yes. You're scared. It's the fear
weird to
holding
think about.
you back. But yeah, for sure. I mean, we do that with ourselves, of course. And we do it with the animals. I mean, even like the saving of endangered species. And I think, of course, there's like a guilt in that. Like if we have caused through natural selection, which is a natural process that occurs whether we're here or not, because there are animals that kill off other species of animals and don't think twice about it, because that's how life evolves.
Right.
But we are so concerned about what we do, which is egocentric.
That must have been wild
stuff.
to have that kind of work environment to inspire your thinking around that.
It was weird, and I knew I was there for a purpose. I was like, because I feel like I preface a lot of things with I had a reading, but I had a reading. I had a reading, and he was like, your future is with animals. That really hit me hard because when I was my daughter's age, my mom was like, you're going to be a veterinarian. Like, you are so connected to animals. And then I grew up, or maybe I experienced trauma, and I don't feel that. You know, I'm like, that doesn't make sense to me. I'm not like an animal whisperer. I'm not like trying to seek animals. Like, I'm really into the plant thing right now. But then I was like, okay, well, maybe I do need to be, you know, maybe I need to open this door. I needed a job. I applied. 2 days later, I got the job. And I was like, okay, I need to be working here. And it taught me, it was a very valuable experience, not for my career, but for my personal journey. Working with children that age was really healing for my inner child, that specific age. What's been the most, maybe like a rewarding job for you, like on a personal level?
Well, it's weird how time doesn't exist, because it does. I don't know how to answer this question. It's like I probably will answer this question in the future to tell you it's the job I have right now. But I can't see it yet. But I can get a glimpse for how I'm in it at the moment. But it wouldn't exist without every other job I've had leading up to this one. I wouldn't have had this job. And it's like, man, that's a rich question. I could just weave you a long tapestry of my whole job history, but you're not asking for a resume. But I mean, my path to become teacher Chelsea, like, which is one of my most solid ways I identify myself, is as a teacher and an educator of, I mean, I preschool is my jam. 3 to 5 year olds is where I really shine, and I truly understand what happens in human development between the ages of 3 and 5. But teaching in all ways, you know, in adult education, when I teach early childhood ed classes, or when I teach conscious discipline parenting, or just like trying to walk alongside people in my life and share my wisdom with them, you know, like any job in any way like that has helped me heal my own self.
Yeah.
You know, like, that's the cool thing about being a teacher is it's bad branding. But the idea that you are the teacher and that someone else is the student is total BS, right?
Yes.
Like, it's a reciprocal relationship where if you're doing it right, you're learning alongside them and learning just as much about yourself and who you think you are to play God and shape their education, you know? And like, the more self-reflective you are about that, the more pleasurable it is and the better learning happens. And so any school I've worked at has held a lot of learning for me in that way. But in particular, one where my most recent iteration where I was a teacher and then I became an administrator who helped hold space for other teachers. And that was like an exponential version of that, right? Because instead of me just having students, I had students who had students of their own. And that, like, it's almost like generational learning in a way, you know? It's like getting iterations of that reflection and all learning together in that process.
That's so interesting. It's like a spiral. It's like a DNA strand.
Everything is a spiral, in my opinion. Like, all of the awakenings and the development are like that. It's just like going round and around again and again, learning the same lessons in different iterations and different levels and different contexts.
Crazy how that works, huh?
Yeah, I made that like more woo-woo than really logical, but I think that's the point. So there we go.
Thank you so much for being here with me today.
It's
I'm
been my
really
pleasure.
looking forward to the next one.
Me too.
Totally honest. Okay. You can catch Earth Soul Medicine live on Fridays at 3 p.m. on KXCJLP or streaming on kxcj.org. You can listen to Earth Soul Medicine podcast recordings on Spotify and Apple Music, or you can watch them on YouTube. Follow Earth Soul Medicine on Facebook and Instagram for updates and new releases. Thanks for sharing space with us today, and we'll see you next time.
Earth Soul Medicine is brought to you by Veil Voyager, a mystical brand based in Southern Oregon, offering intuitively crafted plant essences, psychic mediumship readings, and all things spiritual self-care, including Portal Planner, a yearly guide for spiritual self-care covering topics such as crystal wisdom, plant spirit healing, and ancient rituals, all aligned with the cycles of the moon. Find out more at www.veilvoyager.com or on Facebook and Instagram at VEILVOYAGER. Veil Voyager. Seek and you shall find.